Hi everyone, welcome to Media Metrics and to the program Money for Business. I'm here with you, Oleg Ivanov, the founder of Crypto Bazaar. And and today we're having a very special guest, Matthew Leo, the founder of Origin Protocol. Some of you might probably know this project already. So let's see how the guys are hanging after the crypto winter and what's new with them. So, Matthew, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Oleg. It's a pleasure to be here on the show with you.
Sure, thanks. Listen, the first question usually, since we're online, is where are you based at the moment? I mean, last time we met, I think it was in Taiwan, like a few weeks ago. So what's up
Yeah,
now?
yeah. So I'm back at our headquarters in San Francisco. This is where our main engineering team is, although we do have a distributed team at this point across four different continents. But currently in San Francisco, we'll be doing a little bit of track to our Asian communities in the next couple of weeks as well.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so let's just dive into the project itself and possibly you as a founder, if you don't mind. You have quite a
Absolutely.
probably a very a bit of a unique background for blockchainers, but quite typical for a person from the valley, right? So I mean, you're a Stanford graduate. You've done a job with you probably one of the project managers, product managers at YouTube, if I remember it correctly. Then you've done
That's right.
some of as an entrepreneur, you've done quite a bit of a projects, both successful and not. And now blockchain. So what happened? You took your own boat, or you got carried away with all the crypto craze? Like, how did it happen?
Yeah, so I've actually been very much on an entrepreneurial journey ever since I graduated college and grad school, both at Stanford, like you mentioned. I was captivated by startups, right? These small teams that could work with emerging technologies and, disruptive market forces to build something really, really impactful and really, really, I guess, like large, right? Like, how do you create a lot of value? The first job I was very fortunate to have was an early product manager at YouTube. I was probably employee 25 or so.
Oh my god.
And at that time, it was chaotic, right? It was right before we hit the hockey stick growth. The servers were starting to melt, but we were still trying to figure out, what is our business model and how do we deal with content partners that were at the time threatening to sue us. And so I did a lot of work on those teams, figuring out how to actually um, work with content partners and build products for them. But then also later on, how do we actually monetize YouTube after Google acquired us? So I would say like a pretty traditional, startup background and great startup
Yeah,
training there.
but a
Um,
great brand behind. I mean, it should have
yeah,
been a great school for everybody who was there, right?
yeah, yeah. I learned so much doing that, and then ran product management at two other startups thereafter. Both were successfully acquired eventually, but not quite as impactful as YouTube and the reach that it had. And ever since then, I've been searching for, hey, what's that next thing, right? What is the technology, and what is the right timing, and what's like the right product that can actually have impact on not just millions of users, but hundreds of millions or potentially billions of users in the world. And so this search actually took a few years, right?
Oh
So
wow.
I built several different businesses, some of which completely cratered, and then a couple of which turned into small successes. I had a business that was doing seven figures of annual revenue, kind of just running by itself, and a
Wow,
couple other
nice.
businesses. We were able to sell a company actually about a year and a half ago, a small acquisition. But anyways, like a lot of searching for something that was going to be
Sure.
truly disruptive. And so I had gotten into cryptocurrency almost on a whim and just out of like curiosity, relatively early, but wasn't fully invested, right? So it took several years for blockchain technology and cryptocurrency to really captivate my imagination. I bought a little bit of Bitcoin in 2012 or so, and just let it
Wow.
sit there, but not a whole lot, right? It was mostly just like kind of
Sure.
like a cute, funny
Sure,
thing.
sure, yeah.
And then I also was fortunate enough to kind of participate in the original Ethereum crowd sale, also a small amount. But then, as the cryptocurrency craze started rumbling, it wasn't not at its heights yet, but just when things were starting to get going, there were just like a lot of really interesting things that I was seeing, right? So like we had the DAO, and then we had the DAO hack, and then we had all these different new types of privacy coins. It's like, okay, what is going on here? And so that's when my co-founder Josh and myself started looking at the space. And
Right.
at first, when we looked at it, we actually almost completely, got away from blockchain technology because it seems so nascent. Blockchains are slow, they're expensive, they're difficult to actually build applications around.
Right.
And so our first prototype around Origin, when we actually just decided to build it, we were like, is this actually going to work? Like, is the infrastructure going to support what we want to do? But we kind of like decided to suspend disbelief for a while and imagine what would happen if the technology actually matured over the next 5 years or 10 years. And what happens when it gets faster? What happens when it gets cheaper? What happens when some of these difficult user challenges around the user experience can be abstracted away? Well, then what you're left with is a really, really interesting distributed database that anyone can plug into that allows for trustless transactions and interactions between people all over the world, and allows you to have a form of payment that is again permissionless, without boundaries, that can be fast and cheap. And so that started really getting us to think, and we then just thought about what is the best way to make use of this technology and where can blockchain be the most effective and disruptive. And our main thesis was that blockchain is going to be most interesting when you have many, many different actors in a system, right? And so it's much
Right.
more interesting if you have millions of users interacting with each other versus you have 3 enterprises working on like a private blockchain for banking, et cetera, right? So
Right.
that's
Right.
something that we don't feel strongly about. There are better tools, existing tools like permission databases to solve those
Sure.
problems. But when you look at these existing, very large scale monopolistic companies, and in our case, in particular marketplaces, we saw a huge opportunity to disrupt existing behavior, right? So today, the sharing economy, as well as just other two-sided marketplaces, there are hundreds of companies around the world that are very successful
Right.
in both creating value for users, but then capturing that in almost like an unfair way. They take a very large transaction fee. It could be anywhere from 10% up to even like 40% for some of these marketplaces. And so we feel like these companies are doing a great job servicing users, but that their fees are, egregious, right? And the other part that is problematic is they become monopolies over time. And so they control too much power. They kind of make up their own rules. They control user data. And ultimately, when you look at these marketplaces, it's like the companies that win, right? But then the suppliers, right? The drivers at Uber, they're unhappy, right?
Right. Right.
The suppliers on Etsy, they feel like the rules are too arbitrary.
Sure.
And so how do you actually design these systems so the people actually creating value can actually take a part of it? And so here at Origin, just for viewers that aren't familiar, we are actually building a platform that will enable many different types of decentralized marketplaces. We think of ourselves as the sharing economy without intermediaries. And how do you actually enable true peer-to-peer commerce between people all over the world?
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So let's just go a little bit deeper into this. So a platform for shared economy, does that mean that all the companies who are trying to launch like your new Uber, your new Airbnb, Alibaba, whatever, those would be your potential, I don't know, clients, partners, whatever. Is that the case?
So that's our long-term vision, and we would be thrilled if we could build the technology to enable all different types of use cases on Origin. Yeah, I would say that our goal is to, create these open source protocols and these open source APIs, as well as like application components that allows new entrepreneurs and marketplace operators to basically spin out different types of decentralized marketplaces
Right.
and all types of verticals. So absolutely, we're obviously not there yet today, but
Sure,
our
sure.
goal is that in 5 years, 10 years, the new Uber, the new Airbnb is going to be built on top of
So
Origin.
for those who are probably making their first steps in, dApp development or just, transmitting or like shifting their current business model to the
Yeah.
blockchain space in general, can you just list like a couple of benefits at the moment that you guys have with your platform, or a few years down the road when the whole ecosystem would be a little bit bigger, maybe less frictionless. I mean, with less friction and so on and so forth.
Sure. Yeah. So there's like four main reasons why we're doing what we're doing. The first is we actually want to enable buyers and sellers to kind of live in a world with like reduced transaction fees or potentially even 0% transaction fees.
Right. Okay.
And so we believe that's a better solution for both the buyer and the seller. Now, this may not actually be great for the marketplace operator or developer at first glance because we're kind of removing the original old de facto business model.
Yep.
But what we've done instead is we've implemented kind of a different version of what we call a commission fee that allows sellers to opt in, and sellers can then add a commission in the form of origin token that allows them to then broadcast their listings. Today across the origin application, but tomorrow across hopefully many different third-party applications and affiliates. And so developers will have the incentive because this commission is already attached to different listings that they can promote with their applications. And because we're on blockchain, these developers will be able to tap into a liquidity of existing supply users. We call this shared network effects. The idea is that because all this data is owned by the user, but they have the choice of exposing certain parts of it, their identity data, reputation data, their listing data on the blockchain. This then creates kind of like a pool, right? A pool of both people on the demand side and people on the supply side. And this means that new businesses creating marketplaces in, let's say, home sharing vertical or a car sharing vertical, they can actually tap into an existing user base that Origin and other Origin partners have already helped create. So businesses can get started faster in the future off of Origin. And this is beneficial for the consumer as well, because with their own identity that they've created, they've verified with Origin or our partners, they can take that same Ethereum wallet and interact with all different types of applications on top of the Origin platform.
Sure.
So both sides can get started faster.
Okay.
The other thing that's really interesting about what we're doing is we're trying to bake in crypto economic incentives for all participants, right? So buyers and sellers can earn Origin tokens in the form of Origin rewards. We can talk about that in a little bit more detail. And again, these developers and marketplace operators can also earn Origin tokens by helping sellers get their listings fulfilled.
Okay.
And then another reason I think that is very interesting to developers is that this allows them to create marketplaces that are censorship resistant and can't get shut down. So there are parts of the world, thankfully I'm in the United States where, there's a lot of freedom of speech and, short of, very harmful legal things, we can, partake in free commerce for the most part. But there are still areas that are censored. And in other parts of the world, some very basic goods and services are, not available. And so Origin now makes it possible to have these peer-to-peer networks that are not a central point of failure. And then the last thing that Origin helps on is that it creates a way to get started that's much faster. If you look at existing marketplace businesses, most of them have relied on heavy venture capital subsidies, and they're only available in portions of the world where
there's access to capital. Yeah. Sure.
But what about the other 2 billion people in the world that are in unbanked communities? They don't have strong fiat systems, banking systems. They oftentimes are still bartering or trading, and their currencies might be hyperinflating. So with the advent of digital currencies as well as cheap Android smartphones, there's a way for them to start transacting with each other, but they still need a place to do it. And so we believe in the long term, Origin can open up new types of marketplaces in niche communities, potentially in the third world, where existing companies, these centralized intermediaries, they wouldn't go after, right? Because the immediate opportunity isn't lucrative enough.
Right.
But if you're a small time entrepreneur in, let's say, the Sudan or some Southeast Asia, potentially makes sense for you to start a marketplace just for your local community, because there's like other reasons to do it other than, hey, let's get venture capital returns.
Right. That looks like a lot on your plate at the moment. I mean, in terms of all the directions and initiatives. So let me just try to rephrase it. Right. So number one is basically eliminating all the, let's say, intermediaries in between the trades. managing, of course, the commissions for for centralized marketplaces versus the platform that you're offering. Third probably is basically your like personal info management and personal decisions as to where to disclose it or not, and maybe having some benefits from that. I mean, the next thing is some multiple benefit projects like loyalty programs, let's say, with your token, right? That you
Yeah.
would motivate all the all the guys that would be around there. Yeah, and a few more implementations, if I got it correctly, right?
Yeah, I would say the current platform we're building already has a lot of this, kind of baked in as a cohesive platform, and then we're building applications on top of it, and we also expect our partners to build applications on top of it. So
Right.
it's really like one, sophisticated implementation that has different attributes we think that are favorable
I
for
see.
buyers, sellers, developers, etc.
Right. But that would mean that you would need to migrate a lot of people on your platform, right? To make sure that, that all the dApps that are
Yep.
being launched there, they would have the benefit of like the critical mass for their business. So
Yes.
how you
For sure.
planning to, how do you planning to grow that? Because that looks like, one of the largest choking points now for lots of protocols.
Yeah, it's actually a very, very daunting task, and by no means is it an easy one. Our technology is still fairly nascent, and the broader market has a lot of user experience issues in terms of how to get user adoption. But the good news is at Origin, we are shipping product, very, very fast, and we're iterating very fast. So we actually were live on mainnet as of October of last year. So we're now August of 2019, and we've actually rebuilt our product probably 3 times along the way, and
Oh
have
my God.
recently relaunched. Yeah, we've recently relaunched, and we have brand new mobile applications. You can check them out at originprotocol.com/mobile. Or if you're using a third-party wallet like Coinbase Wallet, Trust Wallet, IM Token, you can go to shoporigin.com. And so the great news is we already have real users. We have thousands of Ethereum wallets that have done thousands of live transactions on top of the network. And so this
Beautiful.
has proven to us that it is actually possible, right? It's not just theory. We have had multiple partners launch marketplaces as well. Again, still early days, and so
Sure,
these numbers
sure.
are still small compared to an Airbnb or an Uber. And it'll take a while for us to kind of get that critical mass, like you said. But we have a very strong belief that once we hit that inflection point, and there's going to be an inflection point where the user experiences are good enough, and there's enough demand side and supply side liquidity, so that people realize that you can actually buy and sell a lot of different things on different Origin products. And we've made it a little bit faster, a little bit cheaper, a much more like streamlined experience. Once that inflection point hits, and Origin applications are at par with existing applications, then all the advantages of blockchain technology and cryptocurrency technology that are inherently built into our system will basically outshine what can exist in
Sure,
today's world.
sure.
Right? And so a lot of that centers around the crypto economic incentives. Two-sided marketplaces are notoriously hard to bootstrap. So how can we bootstrap them? Well, let's give all these people a stake in the network. Everyone can have a stake in the network if you're on Origin. So again, buyers can earn Origin token from verifying their profiles or inviting their friends. Sellers can earn Origin token by selling goods. You can also earn Origin token even just by following us on social media or sharing posts about us. We just announced this yesterday, actually, the latest iteration to Origin Rewards. And then we're also creating different incentive mechanisms, again, for developers and marketplace operators to build on top of our system. And so over time, our goal is that we will have a plethora of use cases for Origin token, different ways to earn it, different ways to use it and spend it, to stake it, and that this will create a very nice growth loop for us.
Right,
So
right.
that's one of the things that we're really, really banking on. The other is the support of the community, right? So we already have a large community, not only in the United States, but also, for example, in Russia and globally. I think a lot of people want to see this happen, right?
Right.
A lot of
No,
people,
yeah, very
not just
diverse.
in
Yeah,
blockchain.
in terms of all your communities. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, just before the our talk, right? You were just saying that you have what are your largest markets right now?
Yeah, so obviously we're very well known in the United States because we are a Silicon Valley project
Right.
and we're backed by well-known Silicon Valley angels and venture capitalists. But also we have strong communities abroad. So
Hmm.
in China, in South Korea, in Russia, these
Yeah.
are the three communities that we actually have local people
Cool.
stationed because there's just such vibrant interest from the community
Right.
with what we're
Right.
doing. And so I've spent some time in China and Korea. I haven't made it out to Russia yet. Waiting for
You're always
the
welcome.
personal invite. Yeah, but we have a Russian regional manager, Czar,
Hmm.
who is interacting with the community, and he's going to start doing some local meetups
Cool.
in Moscow and potentially other cities, and interacting more with Russian press to evangelize the origin mission. But yeah, Russia is right up there. One of the three international communities that we're focused on at the moment.
Well, that's
So
great.
really,
That's
really
great to
excited
hear
about
that. Yeah.
all the work there.
Cool. Thanks. That's very good to hear, of course. Very pleasant. Listen, just following your Twitter and like Medium and some other channels as well. There's I mean, you cannot avoid just seeing like lots of recent developments. I mean, you've mentioned a few of them at the moment that you've launched this what do you call it, meta transactions, where you in a way subsidize. I
Yeah.
mean, you introduce the relayers who are basically in a way subsidizing or helping to reduce the gas fees with Ethereum to
Yes.
smooth the transactions for the gas. Then you relaunch the new application. You started a program with rewards on tokens for those who are disclosing, basically signing up with you and linking as many accounts as possible, and then later deciding how to disclose some of the identities and so on and so forth. So
Yes.
what's your probably like major task for I don't know, current stage of development, or maybe till the end of 2019?
Yeah.
Any plans that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, for sure. So we don't pre-announce specific launches, but I can
Sure.
tell you some of the areas that we're definitely working on. One of the things we were trying to solve with meta transactions, just as an example, is how do we streamline the user experience? How do we make it so that as a new user, you don't actually need to understand that much about crypto. You
Right.
certainly
Right.
don't need to acquire crypto before using our application. That's why we actually sponsor the gas for
Sure.
new people that are verifying their identities or sellers that are creating listings and publishing them on blockchain, right? You shouldn't have to pay any money to, create data that's valuable for the
Right.
community. And so that's the purpose of meta transactions. And it largely was addressed at reducing, seller friction.
Hmm.
So there are some projects we're working on right now to reduce buyer friction, right? Again, how do you make it so that it's not just the crypto enthusiasts that really understand what it means to have your own wallet and acquire cryptocurrency? How can we make that process smoother for buyers and potentially make it so that some of that is abstracted away,
Right.
and then we'll have both buyers and sellers that can get started much easier. Another area of focus is this is more on the business side, but like how do we increase that liquidity, right?
Hmm.
Which verticals are we focusing on? How do we make better tools to onboard people in home sharing, for example, which is an area we're very, very interested in. Gift card is another area we're very interested in. So like some more custom features in certain verticals to make them more compelling. But the overall goal here is like we don't just want to build, we don't want to be an application company, right? We're a platform company that is supporting other people's marketplaces. And so there
Right.
are going to be efforts that are much more geared around the third parties.
Hmm.
We have a lot of letters of intent and a lot of interest from developer partners and marketplace operators, but we haven't built the requisite infrastructure, tooling, and ultimately products that can make them very successful yet. And so that's going to be a focus of ours for the rest of this year and also early next year.
Right.
And then the final component, as you touched upon, is this year we started exploring how do we use origin tokens as an incentive mechanism for all the different ecosystem participants, and so we're going to be pushing hard on that, so that it's going to be a broader, more powerful offering than what we currently have today.
Sure. Wow, that sounds very exciting. Let's hope that we'll hear more interesting news towards the end of the year, at least, especially with those
Yeah.
integrations or partnerships and so on.
Yeah, I
That's
mean, there's a
exciting.
lot of work to do, and so in a certain to a certain extent, it's like wow, like these guys at Origin, are they chewing off too much, right? Is there just too much work to handle? And if I was an outsider, I might say, yeah, like that's just an insurmountable task. But I have so much confidence in our engineering team. I would say we have one of the best, if not one of the best, engineering teams in all of blockchain. We have one of the original PayPal co-founders, the
Wow.
first employee at YouTube, multiple serial entrepreneurs, engineering managers from Google and Dropbox, and also people that have contributed to the open source community before and have and really understand how to get community sentiment
Yeah.
and developer sentiment. So we've had about 150 contributors to GitHub repo, even though our
Wow.
core team
Beautiful.
is less than 20 people. So I'm very, very excited about what our collective engineering efforts can build in the
Mm.
next half year, the next 12 months, and then 18 months. I think is going
Yeah.
to be a really interesting golden time for us.
Wow, that's very interesting to hear. Listen, how did you survive the crypto winter? I mean, you guys started. I mean, at least you appeared on for the investment community apparently early in 2018. Then, we all faced whatever was happening in the blockchain space.
Yeah,
Lots of projects didn't pull through, right? I mean, they fell apart, and
yeah.
some were acquired, some just vanished, and so on. So, how do you guys go through this time period? I mean, did you have to downsize a lot, or like what did you do, and how do you feel yourself now?
Yeah, so I think we were, quite fortunate in some instances, and then also made some good decisions in others. So we did raise, a fair amount of capital,
Hmm.
and a diversified amount of capital. So we had, a lot of money in fiat currency actually, and so crypto winter certainly didn't hit us as hard as some other companies.
Right.
And then along the way, I think we also made some strong decisions. Which is like even after we raised that initial capital in 2017 and then early 2018, we wanted to think of ourselves as a traditional startup, right? So how do you
Right.
do more with less? Which means let's not hire a bunch of people. Let's hire a few of the best people in the world,
Right.
right? And let's try to figure out where to actually deploy our resources and deploy our efforts to be most effective. And so for the longest time, up until recently, actually, like we would never, pay for marketing purposes. We didn't really run ads. We didn't, pay to speak at conferences, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's only recently, now that we actually have a working product that can actually, not just top of the funnel, announcements, but can bring users down to the bottom of the funnel to the user application and to
Sure.
transact on our applications or partner applications, that we've actually started doing more, I would say, like paid media, for example,
Hmm.
right? Sorry, like not paid media, like advertising efforts, right? Like,
Right.
and we
Right.
can measure this to say, hey, are we actually getting the right ROI? So I think we've been spending a lot less on other cryptocurrency projects. We have not hired a ton of people. We were just really hunkered down and operating this as a real startup, because it is a real startup. And
Right.
so, how do you actually build very fast, get data from your users, talk to your partners and your customers, and just be really focused. And so, for the most part, while we weren't immune to the sentiments that crypto winter brought, we just decided we were going to, kind of like take it on the chin and then keep building.
Right.
And then over time, let the results speak for themselves, right? And so I don't think we've fully proven ourselves yet, because, we need to get to millions or hundreds of millions of users to really say that we're smashing success. But I do think that we've probably proven ourselves more than some other blockchain projects, because
Totally.
we've been
Yeah.
continuing to build throughout the year.
Right.
And as I said, we've relaunched multiple projects after getting feedback from our users and the community and understanding what's working and what's not working. And I think the biggest part of building successful startups is almost not just like the initial vision idea, but it's like the systems and processes that you create around your company or project to take that idea to actualization, right? And so it's hiring the very best people. It's iterating very quickly. It's talking to your customers, and it's just being like intelligent entrepreneur, right? Like we shouldn't let any of this blockchain stuff or the price of cryptocurrency get to our heads. Like we need to focus on what we're building and the long-term mission. And so to that extent, I'm very proud of our team for being focused on shipping code and focusing on long-term impact versus letting the crypto winter kind of affect decision-making too much.
Yeah, very temporary. Okay. And so if we look at this space at the moment, right? I mean, there's so many protocols, there's so many wallets, there's so many applications that are trying to, pretty much approach the same, or they're trying to, tackle the same problems, let's say, right?
Yeah.
So who do you regard as your competitors or maybe your peers? I don't know, who you're competing against, right? I mean, trying to win the race and so on.
Yeah. So I split this into two broad categories. So folks that are actually in the blockchain or cryptocurrency spaces, and then, who do we really care about, right? And so if we look at our immediate peers, we can look at, let's say, like OpenBazaar, right? And so they've been around for a long time, have a similar vision, and they have a working product and usage as well. And so we very much respect their vision and their progress. I think there are a couple of key differences. I think we're much more focused on building a platform that can support other applications, and what I understand, we're also much more focused on the sharing economy and the fractional use of goods and services, and they're much more around e-commerce type products, which we touch upon, but that's not our main focus or our main vision. There are a couple other companies that aren't super active in the space that kind of made a lot of noise. I won't point them out, but they kind of announced similar end goals, but they don't have working products. They're not consistently shipping code. And so that's kind of just, not even worth consideration for us.
Right, off the map.
But really, I would say the main competition we have is how do we actually get mainstream users and mainstream developers to start using our platform and our applications. And so the real competitors and the real prize is, the Ubers of the world, the Airbnbs, the Didi in China, right? Which is like the Chinese version of Uber, or Fiverr, or Craigslist to a certain extent. And I know these are very lofty and ambitious dreams, and they're long-term dreams, but that's ultimately what we see as a competition, right? These applications that are already very easy to use, that have slick user experiences, that have good demand side and supply side liquidity. So it's very easy to match people on these marketplaces, and that have already figured out how to operate at a not only a local scale, but global scale.
Right.
And so we have a lot to learn. They've set a great example in many regards as to how to approach the market. But they have shortcomings, again, that we believe that our technology will eventually solve. And so we're competing with them, but not directly. It's a kind of like angled sideways approach. And we'll see how it plays out, but we're really excited to see if our thesis and, more importantly, our products can actually eventually line up and compete head to head with some of these companies.
Right. So do you think, I mean, mentioning this, like traditional companies, if we can call them this way, and their current plans, especially, the later developments of Libra, Telegram, the Gram token, and then Clayton, which is being, basically closing their second round at the moment with already existing, marketplace, taxi services, tons of things already integrated internally. So do you see them as more as a threat to your project? Because I mean, once they integrate or launch their own blockchain solution with I mean, like their trusted, let's say, way of governance and so on and so forth, maybe with a little bit more centralization than your decentralized apps, would they be more understandable for like mass adoption for mass users versus a tiny pool of crypto enthusiasts?
Yeah, so fantastic question. So I think they're both competitors, but also our biggest cheerleaders in the industry. So when
I wonder if they would love this image anyway, but
yeah. like, Facebook Libra or Clayton from Kakao are great examples that, these existing companies see that blockchain and cryptocurrencies can be a disruptive force, right? So in a way, it's very validating for those of us that have been in the industry for a few years prior. And I think they're going to take a lot of the regulatory brunt away
Right.
from smaller companies. Like you said, right? Like Congress is focused on Facebook right now.
Right. Right.
And so that allows Facebook to use some of its massive coffers to help educate the industry, help educate regulators, and promote the technology for the rest of us. And so a rising tide raises all ships, right? And so we see ourselves as, not the smallest ship, but not, Facebook-sized
Right.
yacht or whatever, or battleship, but somewhere in between. And so, like, we're going to benefit from the effects of the general population around the world understanding a little bit more about digital currencies, right? And they don't need to know that it's specifically a cryptocurrency or that it's built on blockchain technology or all the crazy infrastructure technology behind it. They just need to realize the value that some of this stuff creates.
Right. Right.
So then, to that extent, I think all these announcements and developments are again very validating, very helpful, and are going to make our marketing efforts and our community building efforts way easier. Now, are they also competitors? For sure, right? Because they are in a better position to, at least to start, to broadly appeal to a broad base of users. However, we do think that what we have is very, very unique. And usually with brand new disruptive technologies, your approach to the market has to be different than in the previous wave of the internet, right? And so some of these approaches that we're seeing are kind of pretty derivative off of their existing successes and lack some of the qualities and attributes we think that are necessary in the next phase of the internet, Web 3.0, right? So like you mentioned, they're not super decentralized. A lot of it's centralized. Like
Very true.
Facebook
Yeah.
is pay to play, right? You have to have, I believe, like $1 billion market cap or like $20 million entrance fee.
Yes.
I forget the exact numbers, but
Right.
small startups cannot participate. People that are just individuals can't participate in the governing board, and so it's kind of like the same game with a different label around it.
Right.
And I think some of the fundamentals around, how do you build the right incentive systems haven't been fully thought through by some of these larger companies. And I think that ultimately, what's really going to differentiate the companies that survive and blossom in this like new crypto spring and crypto summer, hopefully that we're going to head into,
Right.
is, are you solving real problems for real customers? Whether those customers are enterprises because you're a layer one blockchain, or are they end users that are using a DApp, or somewhere in between, right? There's all different types of customer segments that can be served by this technology, but is your offering actually solving problems, or is it doing things in a better way than existed prior? And so we think that our approach to commerce, peer-to-peer commerce, will solve that problem better than existing systems, even if those existing systems now have broadly used stablecoin like Facebook's Libra, right?
Yeah.
So the product attributes and the value propositions and the problem solved, I think, are quite different enough that we think we're in a unique position.
Yeah, well, makes sense. I agree. So let's move a little bit to the investment side of your business at the moment. So
Sure.
apparently, like most investors who did back you, right, back in 2017, 18, and who, I mean, still are there, they're definitely asking questions, or at least wondering, like, what are your
Yeah.
plans for liquidity? Listings, IOs, potentially, whatever. Like, what do you have?
Yeah.
What are your plans at the moment?
Yeah. So I can't comment too much about conversations with exchanges or whether we're thinking about an IEO or any other type of listing strategy at the
Sure,
moment.
sure, we understand.
I can say that I can say that as a top project in the space, we do get approached a lot by different types of exchanges to explore opportunities. And so, I think at the right time and with the right structure, we would, explore that more deeply. The other thing I will say is, like, we fully recognize that, our incentive system, Origin Rewards using the Origin token, becomes much more interesting, becomes much more vibrant and dynamic once that token is more broadly distributed and more broadly used. And so today you can earn Origin tokens and you can use Origin tokens, but they're locked to the platform. They're not freely tradable. And we do expect that at some point when we change the mechanics so that they are transferable and they can serve more use cases, that it creates a much stronger incentive system that allows us to bootstrap the product more. All this is to say that we don't have any types of announcements, but we are very focused on building the right platform and the right products, and we are obviously very, very keen to kind of like communicate with their existing investors as well as potential new users of Origin token. And so it's a very active area of work for us.
Right, right. You must also be aware that for some reason this, like for the last few months, the secondary market, if we could call it this way, of reselling SAFTs, reselling like locked tokens and stuff is really booming at the moment. I mean, Origin being like one of the projects whose investors are basically paying attention to it at the moment. So how do you regard this? Is this good for the industry, for your project in general, or it's hurting? It's hurting you.
I think that it's a really interesting aspect of the industry that's developed. I don't think that it necessarily has a strong positive or strong negative effect. I do think it's a very interesting way of signaling, though, right? To see which investors are continuing to support projects versus which are looking to get out. How is that sentiment swinging? It's almost like a early indicator of what might happen after tokens are listed, and it might be a leading indicator of are these projects doing good work and making communities very responsive to what they're doing. So to that extent, it's kind of like an interesting point, like a piece of data. But for the most part, we're not really focused on the secondary. We're we believe in first principles, right? So like, how do we again solve user problems, solve developer problems, build things that work, and engage with the community very actively, and then let's let our work drive the results that speak for themselves. So I do think it's a very fascinating development about how do we actually create more liquid markets, and these secondary markets are filling that gap. So it's really interesting to observe, but again, we're not super focused on it.
Right. Interesting. All right, we're moving towards the end of our talk, to our conversation. So, if you mind me asking like a couple of very quick questions, to probably close up. So, number one, imagine like 5-10 years from now, we meet somewhere in a coffee shop, in a bar, or whatever. You get a glass of water.
Moscow.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully a little bit. I mean, like this would not be our first time in Moscow, but anyway. So and let's just imagine that at that time, everything that you have planned with your project at the moment, everything, all the boxes are ticked. So everything that you planned, I mean, it has been fulfilled. So what is this picture? What is this vision for Origin?
Yeah. So first thing I'll say, kind of a caveat to the answer, is that things never go according to plan.
Totally.
We should always have one, because without a plan, we're not going to go anywhere. But
we're talking about dreams here, right?
But yeah. I think that the big dream we have is that, a lot of your daily interactions, right? These commercial transactions can be powered by our platform underneath, right? And you don't necessarily need to know that everything is Origin powered application, but you should, as a user, realize that, hey, like this new mobile application I'm using, whether it's on my mobile phone or by this point maybe it's like a hologram or it's like a VR thing, right?
Right.
We're talking 10 years from now.
Sure.
This is allowing me to directly transact with some other peer-to-peer person, and that person can be anywhere else in the world, right? And so it needs to be a global network. It needs to be fast, instantaneous. It needs to have a lot of different verticals that are still built on the same underlying protocol. So all different types of services, like we mentioned, the ones that are obvious, right? Ride sharing, home sharing, contractor services, but also things in e-commerce. Also, let's say like more weird or obscure verticals that you wouldn't really think about today. If we can power all that, then that would be a huge, I guess, like victory for us. And the other thing is like, okay, now not only are we actually powering all this commerce, but are people's lives better because of it, right? Are these end users, the supply side, like taking more of that money back home for themselves rather than paying this random third party intermediary, right? Do all these people feel compelled that they're part of this greater human vision to like increase global GDP and productivity and growth in these services, because they all have a piece of the network, right? Every single person participating in the network is also a network stakeholder. And so, yeah, I imagine a world where, you might be using Origin enabled applications or services multiple times a day. And you may or may not know that the whole thing is built on top of Origin. But you will know that your life is better and you're able to get access to goods and services where you previously weren't able to. Things are a much more efficient market because there are no intermediaries taxing the system. And it's all over the world. And maybe in 10 years, if Elon Musk has his way, we'll have our first Origin marketplace on the moon, or even Mars or something, right? Like big dreams. Yeah.
Okay, so talking about this individuals, let's say, that are well known around the world. Apparently, this vision that you have is massive, right? And apparently, the road might be bumpy along the way. So, one of the resources that any team would need, of course, is basically a team of people who would be sticking together to actually walk this road. So the second, probably the last question is there anybody that you would like to have on your team out of the people who are, I mean, any part of the world, any industry, any area, of probably even those who are not with us anymore? So who would be your ideal dream team of, I don't know, advisors, people who would actually let you go along this road, fast and maybe more efficient?
Yeah, I haven't thought about this in too much detail, but we already have a bunch of like informal advisor types, like folks that have built successful companies in the past. So certainly, everyone says this, so it's not a very novel answer. But if Steve Jobs is still alive, I would love to get his take on.
You would be surprised, but not everybody's saying this. But yeah, anyway, all right.
Well, I think what Steve Jobs has been able to do, or was able to do, is how you turn very complex products into very emotionally stirring, simple products that billions of people can use, right?
Totally.
And so I think that's one of the big steps that's missing from what we have here in blockchain, right? Like the technology is very complex, but it looks very complex,
right?
And so many users are like, "Oh, this is scary," right? Like I don't get it, I don't want to get involved with it. And so I think there needs to be not just very strong engineering, but there also needs to be very strong product design and like a go-to-market strategy.
Right.
So someone like Steve Jobs would be fantastic. I think that this sounds a little bit silly and it sounds a little bit, Justin Sun, but I do think that if we're able to convince some of the the financial stalwarts of industry, right, whether that is like a Warren Buffett, or it's folks that have worked in previous centralized banking systems or whatever, to start seeing the light, and seeing what this technology can bring to the world and start becoming advocates. I think that would be extremely beneficial, right? And so if you can turn the skeptics, your strongest skeptics, into supporters, then that you're onto something big, right? Because those stronger skeptics have reasons to not believe in technology or your team or your approach. But if you can systematically break these down and show them like why this is going to change the world, and then they're able to flip, then they're going to be the ones that are championing you. And so I do think, I won't name specific names, but some of the big skeptics of our industry, I would love to, in the next couple of years, call them instead as like advisors or partners. So,
Beautiful. Well, let's hope this happens
yeah.
faster than in 2 years. Well, thanks very much, Matthew. That's been a very interesting and very deep discussion. Apparently, I mean, the time is always not enough to actually go, maybe in more details.
Yeah.
For those of you who are watching us, please visit Origin Protocol. I mean, you can Google it and find what the guys are doing. It's very impressive stuff. They've recently released a new web application with lots of very interesting awards in tokens for the very simple things that you guys can do on, on the web, on your applications, apparently. So, Matthew, all the luck to you and the team, and I'm sure we'll definitely bump into each other, in some parts of the world at the conferences or whatever. And whenever
Yeah.
you get ready to come to our freezing Moscow, just let us know, and we'll definitely try to make this welcome. I mean, a warmer sort of welcome than the weather here.
Yeah, and if nothing else, there's always the world's best vodka, right?
Hey, you know how to
Got
treat
to
it,
stay
yes, for
warm
sure.
somehow. Yeah.
Totally. Thanks very
But
much.
yeah, hopefully I will see you and the Russian community in Moscow sooner than later. We feel very, very blessed to have such a strong following in Russia. And we really just want to, I guess, like thank all your listeners and viewers for that continued support. And hopefully over the next months, we continue to earn that respect and that trust in our products and our brand. And we look forward to spending more time with you, both virtually, of course, but also physically on the ground, engaging with the community. So see you soon in Russia.
See you, man. All right. Thanks very much again, and
Okay.
have a good day. Cheers.
Thank you so much.